Scientists warned humanity about climate change countless times, but nobody listened. Several hurricanes, tornadoes, floods, and droughts caused destruction worldwide in 2019. In response to the loss of several large cities, world leaders, led by the US, finds a method to neutralize the storms using a network of thousands of satellites, each deploying countermeasures to affect the elements of weather. This net of satellites was known as the Dutch Boy and was designed by Chief Architect Jake. While the Dutch Boy was initially owned by the United States, but the Dutch Boy would be transferred to an international council in 3 years. One day, Jake is called to a court hearing with a US committee because he punched a federal inspector and brought a Dutch Boy online without any authorization from the government. Jake doesn't accept the proposal and meets their words with SAS, ignoring his brother Max's text asking him to stop. Jake explains to everyone that he punched a federal officer because he wouldn't stop changing machine parts that almost burned him to death. He also activated the Dutch Boy to prevent a series of desaturating storms that would have killed numerous people on Earth. The Senate just want Jake to be obedient, so they decide they'll send newly trained staff to the station, fire some of his old team members, which he refers to as friends. After the meeting is over, Jake meets Max, who works under the US Secretary of State. Max has been chosen to operate Dutch Boy. He fires Jake because he thought it was the best thing for the project. When Jake learns his brother can do this to his family, he never speaks to him again. After 3 years, a UN team stationed in Afghanistan gets some weird readings on their radar and goes to check a village nearby. To their surprise, the entire village is frozen and the people are dead from the cold even in the desert. This finding is recorded to US President Palma and his team, who agree it must be kept secret for now. There's evidence that this was caused by a Dutch Boy from space. However, politicians don't want to shut it down because the press will immediately investigate the reason for shutting down a powerful project. As Max proposes to send someone to check on the malfunction, the Secretary of State replied that Jake would be the best candidate since Jake is the only one who knows the station well. Meanwhile, in the Dutch Boy, Afghanistan's satellite comes back to the Space Center. Engineer Habib finds some strange data on its hard drive and hides a copy in his locker. Afterward, he tries to go back to his room, but when he steps into an empty room, suddenly the doors lock and the windows break, resulting in Habib launching into space and dying instantly. The next day, Max visits Jake, who lives in Florida after his divorce, and gets his daughter Hannah 2 weekends a month. Jake doesn't want to see Max and sends him away. However, Max tells him about Afghanistan's airlock accident, asking him to rejoin the project to fix the malfunctions. When Jake refuses, Max bursts at him by pointing out that his invention is killing people. Later in the Hong Kong offices of the Pacific Climate Council, Long logs into the system and notices something weird about the incident in Afghanistan, so he tries to call Max to warn him. He goes to the supermarket to get some eggs, noticing how hot it is. In fact, the heat is so bad that a cat tries to stay inside the fridge, and when Long accidentally drops his eggs, they fry on the road, and Long notices a small volcano emerging from the road and destroying the streets. He immediately drives in his car, crossing around all the panicking people and crumbling buildings. Long doesn't stop until he reaches the bridge outside the city, and his heat detector indicates he's out of danger, but when he turns around he discovers Hong Kong is now destroyed. In Florida, when Jake leaves, Hannah cries because she thinks Jake won't return and he always lies, but Jake promises he'll be back for her. Moments later, Jake boards a shuttle and flies to the Dutch Boy, feeling at home again in space. He meets Commander Fassbinder, the station's chief scientist, who introduces him to her team, which includes security officer Dusset and system analyst Duncan. They think the incident in Hong Kong was a gas explosion because that's what the news said, but Jake is sure it was caused by the same thing that froze the village in Afghanistan. Meanwhile, on Earth, Max is spending quality time with his girlfriend Sarah, who is part of the president's secret agency. They're called by Long, who tells Max of the burning heat he felt before the incident happened, meaning it was not caused by a gas pipe. In an attempt to confirm his theory, Long attempts to check on the Dutch Boy, but his account has been blocked just as Max's has as well. He thinks someone in the government is covering up a system defect, and this has the potential to cause a geostorm, which consists of simulated harsh weather events triggered all over the globe. Max promises to investigate it, and Sarah tells Max that the president has decided to do a last-minute press briefing, which sounds quite sudden. At the office, Long tries to log in when the power turns out. He hears strange voices coming from the corridor and rushes to hide in Almira. This allows Long to watch how US agents take away his laptop, his files, and all other important stuff. In the Dutch Boy, Jake learns that Afghanistan's drive was wiped clean by the malfunction, so he orders the team to check the data of the other satellites to track any signs of virus corruption. The next day, Max visits his close friend Dana, a cybersecurity expert for the government IT department. As he asks her to investigate the blocking of accounts, Dana confirms it was programmed to appear as if it was a glitch, but it was definitely intended. In the Dutch Boy, Jake has a video call with Max, who reveals the incidents may have been the result of foul play. Jake is glad to hear this because he knew the Dutch Boy was built well, and Max authorizes him to retrieve the Hong Kong satellite. This causes a fight because Jake doesn't think he needs Max's permission to do anything, and Max reminds him that he had to clean up after Jake's dumb mistakes all the time after the their parents died. He's tired of being responsible for his brother's mistakes, so if Jake misbehaves he'll be fired again. The Hong Kong satellite arrives at the station, but suddenly the robot got crazy and begins shaking its arms, damaging part of the space station before dropping the satellite. This absolutely destroys the satellite, and the team has to revive the few parts that survived the crash. Unfortunately, the accident created an electrical short circuit and burnt all the drives, so Jake thinks they don't have any proof of virus corruption to analyze. Dusset informs Jake he's been looking at a video of Habib's death and he's discovered something. The panels that exploded had drives in them, and one of them got stuck in the solar tower. Jake and Fassbinder go on a spacewalk to retrieve the panel, but suddenly Jake's suit begins malfunctioning and he loses control of his movements. The shaking causes him to drop the panel and get hit against the solar station, so he ejects his jetpack and manages to hold on to an iron rod to avoid floating away in deep space. Moments later, Fassbinder brings him back inside, and Jake reveals he took the drive from the panel before letting go of it. When the team arrives, Jake doesn't tell them about the drive because he is sure his suit was disrupted by one of them. Afterward, Jake and Fassbinder investigate the drive and discover there are no signs of corruption. This confirms someone has caused the so-called accidents on purpose. Jake tries to find the login information behind this programming, but he's locked out. In the meantime, Long arrives in DC and agrees to meet with Max and Sarah on a busy street. However, when Long is about to cross the road, he's pushed in front of a speedy car. The strange man escapes in his own car and Sarah tries to go after him, but she isn't fast enough. Max runs to Long's side and hears him say the word Zeus before he dies. A few hours later, Max gets a call from Jake and takes it because he says it's an emergency. Jake apologizes only for his behavior and reminds Max that they have an unspoken code between brothers before sharing the entire story of their fishing trip with their father. Max catches on to Jake's intentions and rushes to Dana to show her a recording of Jake's video call. Dana doesn't understand how it's an emergency, and Max explains they never went fishing as kids with their father, meaning Jake is trying to pass a message in codes because he thinks he's being watched by someone. Max gives Dana the code they used as kids, and Dana puts together different timelines from the video recording to create a real message: trust no one. Next, Max asks Dana to look into Project Zeus, and Dana finds a file that is double encrypted in a White House security network which she cannot hack. She needs the right credentials to break it. Moments later, Sarah returns home and sees signs someone has broken in. Taking out her gun, she discovers it's Max and Dana, who don't want anyone to know they are there. Max asks Sarah for her credentials to steal the information, and at first Sarah refuses because it would be breaking her oath, but she changes her mind when Max points out that if he's asking for something so serious, it's because it's extremely important. Back to the Dutch boy, Jake and Fassbinder check the security cameras and discover Habib hid something in his Almira. However, when they check it out, they find the locker empty. Suddenly Dusset appears pointing his gun at them, and since he doesn't immediately kill them, Jake understands Dusset wants to find out who killed Habib too. After confirming they're all on the same side, Dusset confesses Habib's things are in a different locker. He explains he saw the security cameras too and said nothing because he thought the criminal would reveal themselves by coming to destroy the drives. All three opens the right locker and finds a copy of the drive, which reveals someone has put a virus in the station system. Meanwhile, Sarah gives Dana her login information, allowing her to find the files on Project Zeus. She finds a series of simulations that end with geostorms, and Max realizes someone used those simulations to make the storms happen for real. Max then video calls Jake to inform him someone is weaponizing the Dutch boy to attack specific cities, and Jake confirms the virus is being used. He wants to shut down the Dutch boy temporarily, that way a reboot can flush out the virus. Max authorizes it, but there's a slight problem. The only one that has the codes is the president, and Jake doesn't trust Palmer. Only someone with security access can block their accounts, and it's no coincidence that in 3 weeks the US must hand control of the Dutch boy to the International Council. Max asks Jake to keep an eye on the satellites while he finds a way to obtain the codes. President Palmer will attend a national convention in Orlando a few hours later. Max approaches Sarah secretly at the airport and convinces her that the conspiracy is real, so she must help him steal the codes. For Max to board the flight, he tells his bosses that he is flying to Florida to see his dad. Later in space, the Dutch boy receives warning messages indicating 200 satellites are malfunctioning. The consequences are soon seen on Earth. A massive ice storm begins hitting Tokyo, and a huge wave takes away a city with it. Since he still can't shut down the station, Jake decides to launch the spare satellites to replace the ones causing destruction all over the world, but it explodes as well. However, managed to replace another one in time before the rest of the city comes down too, but at that moment another alerting signal comes in: a geostorm is starting. On Earth, Max sees the news of the disaster and gets the alert on his tablet too, discovering the storm is coming to Florida next. Deckham approaches him and demands to know the truth as he is the chef of the Dutch boy. Max tells him the president is behind an incoming geostorm, but Deckham has bad news. They can't get the codes from Palma because the president himself is the code. They need his fingerprints in his eye's retina to activate the shutdown, so they have no choice but to take custody of him. At that moment the Dutch boy crew is shocked to discover the station has initiated a self-destruct sequence on its own. They try to cancel the command but they're locked out by the system, and Jake realizes the only one with the knowledge to do this is Duncan, the system analyst of the Dutch boy. As the station begins exploding one by one, Jake tells the crew to evacuate. But he finds out Duncan is still on the computers and begins beating him up, but Duncan has a gun stuck under his desk and uses it on Jake. Then Duncan admits he did put the virus in the system and that he accepted a handsome amount of dollars from the government. He also confesses he wants to watch the world burn in ashes. Jake disarms Duncan and beats him up again, but Duncan retrieves the gun and, while struggling, accidentally shoots a window. Immediately Jake runs into another room and locks the door while Duncan is ejected into space, tearing him in small chunks. Back in Florida, Deckham takes Max into a conference room saying they'll talk to the president there, but it's all a trap. It turns out Deckham is the actual mad guy and the president knows nothing, so he tries to shoot Max, but he manages to escape through a back door and meets with Sarah, letting her know that an electric storm will kill everyone here, meaning Deccan will get rid of all the presidential candidates in one go. In order to prevent the brothers from seeing the truth, Deckham told Max to hire Jake by giving him control of the Dutch boy. Their only option is to kidnap the president, so Max prepares a card as Sarah shoots in the air, acting as if someone in the crowd was about to shoot Palma. In order to ensure the president's safety, Sarah and another bodyguard are escorting him, but when they're alone in a corridor, Sarah knocks out the bodyguard and forces Palma to join her in a self-driving car arranged by Max. While everyone in the station evacuates, the geostorm hits Earth. Tornadoes appear in Mumbai, a heat wave strikes Moscow, and a mega tsunami hits Dubai. A lightning storm hits Florida. Max and Sarah manage to get the president out right before the stadium is destroyed. Deckham escapes the stadium and sends his men after the president, who is told the whole story by Max. Sarah has to drive like crazy to dodge the lightning, destroyed roads, and gunshots coming from Deckham's men. There isn't much time left, so Sarah decides to drive backward to shoot at most of the men, then hits their car with hers. The car flips and explodes when it's hit by lightning. Nearby, Deckham gives his bodyguard a rocket launcher to shoot at the car with the president. As soon as the rocket hits its target, the car explodes, but Sarah appears behind Decca and captures him. She used the self-driving system to make the car move forward and set up the trap for Deckham. Now the police are coming to arrest him. Deckham tries to tell the president he did it to get rid of their enemies, and he thinks Jake would agree since he invented such the powerful machine. Hearing his brother getting insulted causes Max to punch Deckham. Throughout the news, Hannah notices all the natural disasters taking place because of the Dutch boy's lack of security. While the last shuttle leaves, Jake decides to stay in the station because the reboot must be done manually. Fassbinder tries to stay too, but Jake sends her away. Meanwhile, Palma is taken to the space center and he immediately activates. It is impossible to reverse the self-destruct sequence, so the brothers are forced to say goodbye in tears. They reconcile after all these years, and Max promises to take care of Hannah. Jake runs to put on his astronaut suit and tries to enter the computer, but it won't accept his code. His surprise is heightened when he discovers Fassbinder stayed behind and she knows an alternative escape route. Having reached the computer, they reboot it manually, with Fassbinder flushing out the virus while Jake shuts down the satellites, successfully stopping the geostorm. At that moment the room explodes, and Jake and Fassbinder are left floating outside in space. After watching his creation die, Jake discovers there is still a satellite left, so they take advantage of the explosion wave to get to it. The duo manages to get inside, but then the station finishes destroying itself and NASA loses contact with them, thus they can't control the satellite to bring it back. Suddenly, a mayday pattern appears on the screen. It turns out the satellite was pushed away by the explosion, so Jack and Fassbinder are fine. After a few hours, one of the evacuation shuttles returns to pick them up. Max reunites with Jake and they have their first hug in years. The siblings go fishing 6 months later and find it boring, finally understanding why their father never took them. A week from now, Jake will return to space to build a space station and wants to spend one last happy moment with his family before he leaves. Nevertheless, Jake promises his daughter he will be back soon after he has finished his work. Subscribe to Universal Recaps and turn on notifications for regular updates. Give a thumbs up if you like our content.